I am. Check. Great. So, friends, good afternoon. Gemar Chatima Tova. May you be sealed in the book of life. For those who are fasting, those who are able, I hope it is going well. Probably for you and for me, things are getting fuzzier, but here we are together. This has become one of my favorite times of the day to join together, not just in worship, but in community. Last year, we created an intro. I want to let you know, if you're watching at home, we have been having internet challenges, and we are recording this program. So if there is a problem, we'll be able to share it with you after the program is finished. We do hope that it streams through and it continues. We're going to begin with the intro that we made last year for when we were totally on the internet, and I will tell you why after we share that video. With us. They were a huge part of the holy days last year, so I wanted to take the time also to thank you for those beautiful images. I've asked 4 members of our community to share their stories, their Jewish journeys. What you'll see are 4 incredibly different journeys, and we are really honored and grateful for you to share your stories on this afternoon. Each of you is a valuable part of this community, and a friend and someone I'm really honored to share today with. And so I've invited them as they come to the bima to speak. You're welcome, as you're comfortable, to remove your mask when you're up here to make speaking easier. I'll invite John Barr to please come forward first.
Friends, a major event happened in my life this past January. Barbara and I went to Montgomery County's SPCA to adopt our 3rd dog, Charlie. When we met Charlie, I fainted for the 2nd time in 2 weeks. But this time, I also broke my arm. This led to a long ambulance ride to Grandview Hospital. During that ride, I asked the medic about my vital signs. He was very honest, not that good, and going in the wrong direction. As he talked to the hospital on what to administer to me, I felt comfortable in that whatever would happen, even the worst cast outcome, in my mind, I said and heard the words of the mourner's Kaddish in my head. I felt comfort in my Jewish faith. 3 weeks later, I was discharged with the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. How did I get to the point where I was so comfortable being Jewish? My Jewish journey began when I was 16, when my father enrolled me in a high school for boys in Boston. Up until then, I had no exposure to Jewish people, but my 2 best friends at that private school were Jewish. On the first day on campus at Boston University, I visited Hillel House out of curiosity. That was the beginning of many friendships with Jewish people, both in my first marriage and in the field I worked in all my life, photography. Fast forward to 1982. I was a new arrival in Minneapolis working for Kodak. I usually ordered a toasted bagel and cream cheese at a supermarket deli counter. One day, the young lady who usually helped me said, "Let me introduce you to my older sister, Barbara." And the rest, they say, is history. Barbara and I were married in Minneapolis by a young, open-minded rabbi. When we arrived in New Jersey, we went temple shopping. It came down to a conservative temple and a very liberal Reform temple, which welcomed me as a full-fledged member. Barbara served later as the temple's president, and where I was invited to carry the Torah, and I served on the temple board even before I brought both my feet into the Jewish faith. When I felt comfortable with the idea of converting, I approached the senior rabbi, who responded by lending me a book and asking me what day I wanted to convert on. That didn't sit well with me, so I approached the junior rabbi, who suggested I take a lay-led Introduction to Judaism course, and after that, study with her weekly, and finally, when we both agreed it was appropriate, I did convert. When our youngest child out of our blended family married, and they chose to adopt their first baby and live in Overbrook, we were both retired. We chose to follow them, and we found a home close by in Ardmore. We found ourselves temple shopping again. There were two Reform temples closer to us than Temple Sholom, but we didn't feel right in either one of them. On my daily morning drives to Starbucks on Route 3 to get coffee, I noticed Temple Sholom, which prompted an interview with Peter Rigler, and at our first potluck dinner, we were greeted by Ed and Gloria Kresh, who became our lifelong friends, among many more of you at our shared temple home. We are blessed as we age that our Jewish journey at Temple Sholom continues. Shana Tova.
John, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being such a vital part of our community. We are certainly grateful to have you and Barbara as part of our Temple Sholom family. It's my pleasure and honor now to invite Maggie Bullock to please come forward. She has 3 perfectly behaved children. Honestly, yeah, it's the best part so far of my Yom Kippur. Josh is doing just fine, but the children are lovely.
We'll see how long that lasts. Shana Tova, thank you for having me. My Jewish journey began at a young age. Since I was a young girl, I've always wanted to be a part of the Jewish community. Most kids don't really think about that, but I knew after attending my first bar mitzvah, I think it was Chad Lassen's, and celebrating the high holidays with my friend Rachel and her family, that there was something about Judaism that I wanted in my life. I remember vividly one evening, I said to my parents at age 13, "Mom and Dad, I want to convert." And they didn't really take it seriously. I spent a large part of my childhood singing and performing and have always been moved by music. This was a valuable skill when I would attend synagogue for my friend's bar and bat mitzvah services. I didn't speak or understand Hebrew, but music has a way of bringing people together in unity. I loved singing with the cantor during the services, and I felt it in my heart. I also loved seeing how proud the families were of their children's accomplishments. I loved listening to the story of Passover and being intrigued that there were items on a plate that had symbolic meaning. And I loved how proud everyone was to celebrate and honor their Jewish heritage. I never felt proud to be a Catholic, which is how I grew up. I never connected with being Catholic, with exception to a few instances here and there, as you might guess, when I was singing in church. As I got older, I tried to reconnect with Catholicism, just so I could be a part of something, but it was unsuccessful. I got engaged to a man who was not very religious, and although it would never be a part of our life, I was adamant that we get married in a Catholic church. I still question my reasoning to this day as to why I was adamant, but there I was. We had to do a marriage boot camp, which brought no real value to our life or our relationship, but I just kept going through the motions. This is what you do, this is what you say, this is what your parents want. In the end, the marriage did not last because we did not have the same values. Despite not really appreciating religious education as a child, I eventually realized it taught me how to be a good person, neighbor, friend, lover, and human being. I wanted that, but had just not figured out how to incorporate it into my life. The great thing about going through a divorce at a young age is that you learn what you do not want in a partner, but you're still nimble enough to grow emotionally. You can admit that you're wrong, but still tell your parents that you don't need their advice. Ultimately, I realized what I valued in life, love, and partnership, and I was lucky enough to find that in my amazing partner, Josh. As we've grown our family, I've realized more and more that all the things I took for granted as a child, I want to give our kids so that they can experience the value of a religious education and a community. I have found that community in Judaism, and in particular here at Temple Sholom. From the first time Josh and I toured the temple, I knew this is where I wanted to be, and it became apparent how important it was for me to become a Jew. I knew that I wanted to enjoy the religious experience in its entirety. I started my studies in 2019 with Rabbi Rigler, and then online, via Zoom, by the way, before it became popular. And in October of 2020, I had the most beautiful conversion in the mikveh at Beth Hillel. We all know what 2020 had in store for us, and this was really the bright, shining star through a really terrible time. I'm happy to be here and to finally have become a Jew after 25 years. If you've been paying attention, you can do the math and figure out my age. But I have not completed my journey. I have continued it into the next chapter with my family, friends, and this amazing community here. Thank you for allowing me to share this with you today.
Thank you, Maggie, for your willingness to share your beautiful words and share your family with us as well. You are such an important part of our preschool, and we've enjoyed the time really getting to know you and look forward to many, many more years of sharing happy occasions together. It is our pleasure now to invite a member of our board, Susan Friedman, who also helps to chair our religious school and does a million other things in our community, recently retired, and we put her to work, it seems, here at Temple Sholom. We're grateful for all that you do, and thank you for sharing your story today. Thanks, Susan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lashana Tova. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Susan Barbara Ross Friedman, or in Hebrew, Sarabela Bat Machlav Moshe. I was born at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania on June the 4th, 1947, to Martha, age 25, and Morris, age 38. My father's surname of Ross had been shortened from Rosinski when my paternal family arrived at Ellis Island from Russia. 5 years after I was born, we welcomed my younger brother, Neil Stephen. I was extremely excited to have a baby brother. Neil and I were named after our paternal grandparents, Sarah and Nathan, both of whom had died before we were born. My parents and I lived in Upper Darby during my first year of life. We then moved to the brand new neighborhood of Overbrook Park, a row house development in West Philadelphia. We also became members of Har Zion Temple on 54th Street in Winfield. Overbrook Park was a glorious place in which to grow up. Other than the eventual Korean War, it was generally a time of peace. Families, mostly Jewish on our street, were outside all the time during the warm weather, and we were always safe. Living in a row house was a superb experience, as the entire street was filled with post-World War II babies, baby boomers as we were called. The adults regularly joined one another on their patios as the kids jumped rope, played hopscotch, jacks, hide and seek, and so many other games outside until darkness fell. Sherwood Road, right down the street from Barson's and Liss's, okay? Judaism played a major role in my life. I believe that I was born with a strong personal belief in God. My maternal grandparents were in their 50s when I was born. Both were Orthodox Russian Jews. Though I love Shabbat, all the Jewish holidays, learning to cook from my Baba, as I affectionately called her, and so much more, I also have vivid memories of my mom feeling much more comfortable with conservative Judaism rather than Orthodox Judaism. And so that was a slightly negative thread that ran through my life for the 32 wonderful years that I had my Baba. My grandfather died when I was just 7 years old, but I still cherish the memories of our time spent together. After his death, my grandmother always spent Shabbat with us and shared my bedroom whenever she visited. She is the one who planted the seeds in my soul to never, ever forget the Holocaust. And so I think that I read every single book that was available to me on that subject as I grew to adulthood and beyond. Har Zion soon became my home away from home. My parents provided me with a top-notch Jewish education. I attended religious school at Har Zion from nursery school through the end of high school, which was then called Midrashah. I was a very active member of USY and adored Hebrew school. I was also blessed with delightful, fun-filled summers at Camp Rita, a Jewish overnight camp in Zieglersville, Pennsylvania, run by the Jewish Family and Children's Agency. I started out as a camper and then eventually became a waitress, a CIT, and finally a counselor. Ethel Levinson, my boss, was a longtime member of Temple Sholom. The Jewish holidays were and remain highlights of the year for me, for so many different reasons. The high holy days in particular mark a magnificent opportunity for fresh new beginnings. As the timing of the fall holidays loosely coordinates with the start of the school year, and since I have been an educator all of my professional life, this is my most favorite time of year. My mom and dad were way ahead of their time. My parents always hosted the high holy days. One of the greatest gifts they ever gave Neil and me revolved around the fact that the guests sitting around our holiday table were most often from different religious and/or racial groups than we were. Those friends had the opportunity to learn all about Judaism from our family traditions, just as we learned from them when we were invited to their homes for Christmas, Easter, and other family celebrations. Our parents taught my brother and me to respect, honor, and learn from the beauty of other traditions. They believed in diversity and inclusion long before it became more popular to do so. What a superb and sacred gift that was. I went on to college, earning my BS from the University of Pittsburgh, followed by 3 master's degrees, one from Pitt, one from Temple, and the last from Villanova. I eventually became certified in Pennsylvania as a teacher, guidance counselor, and principal in grades K through 8. As an undergrad, I was very active in Pitt's Hillel program, and will add that it was one of the very best in my opinion. As fate would have it, when I returned to Philadelphia after having lived in Pittsburgh for 5 years, I wanted to meet new people. Har Zion was then running a computer dating match service coordinated with the Hillel chapters at the major graduate schools in Greater Philadelphia. Computer dating was quite in vogue at that time, and if you're my age, you might remember that. As I had minored in computer science, I filled out 2 identical applications just to make sure that the computer program was a good, solid one. Paul, my dear husband, had recently arrived in Philadelphia from New York to attend graduate school. As it turned out, Paul also filled out 2 separate applications for his own reasons. Yes, we are both totally nuts and think along the same lines, and that's why we are such a perfect match. Paul and I met in April of 1972, became engaged that August, and were married on April Fool's Day, 1973. We were one of the very last couples to be married in the very beautiful main sanctuary of Har Zion in Winfield, and one of the very first couples to be married by Rabbi Gerald Wolpe, Zaal, the brand new rabbi at Har Zion at that time. It poured like crazy on our wedding day. It was like a monsoon. Our flight to Barbados was postponed, so we had to leave a day later. But as those raindrops incessantly fell, my dear Bubba kept telling me over and over again, a Jewish superstition, that rain was good luck. As it turns out, my Bubba was right. Paul and I have been married for over 48 years. As with most other long married couples, we have traveled hand in hand through the peaks and valleys of a long, meaningful relationship. Most thankfully for us, the valleys always made our marriage stronger, and they never pulled us down for too long. Thus began a very wonderful part of my life, marriage, and we eventually hoped children. Interestingly, Paul had been influenced in a powerful way by his grandfather, who had been an Orthodox Jew. Like my mom, Paul was searching for something other than Orthodox Judaism. Right about that time, autumn of 1973, Carol and Barry Jacobs, now longtime members of Temple Sholom, were on their honeymoon in the Caribbean. My parents happened to be at the same resort, met, and fell totally in love with them. Carol and Barry were already living in Broomall and loved it, and they were members of Temple Sholom. We moved to Broomall because of them, attended our first service at Temple Sholom as their guests, and have been members of Temple Sholom for some 40-some years. Paul was a clinical psychologist at Haverford State Hospital for many years, during which he maintained a private practice as well. I began my career first as a teacher in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, followed by several years as a guidance counselor in the Chester Upland School District. It was during those early years that we decided to start our family. Lo and behold, to our great shock and surprise, we discovered that we had infertility issues. We pursued that path for a few years, after which we decided to focus on adoption opportunities. As Paul and I had each dearly loved children throughout our lives, we truly believed that God had a special plan for us. We knew that we would love, cherish, and forever nurture any baby who blessedly came our way. God works in remarkable ways. We came home from a Sunday brunch one day in the spring of 1978 to find a colleague of Paul's sitting on our front step. She happily announced to us that she and her husband, already adoptive parents, wanted to recommend us to the Edna Gladney home in Fort Worth, Texas, as prospective adoptive parents. Edna Gladney is one of the largest, most well-known adoption agencies in the country. This was truly one of the most incredible moments of our lives. We successfully went through all the required procedures and visits and carefully filled out every single form. We were approved as potential adoptive parents within a short period of time. Edna Gladney promised us 2 children. We were very lucky. Though we could not select the sex of the first, we were given the opportunity to select the sex of the second. Mark Alexander Michael Eliahu was born on September 27, 1979, and Lauren Rebecca Moshe Rachel, Rabbi Seligman helped us name her, was born on August 26, 1982. Now we had everything. Because we were not sure of our children's religious backgrounds by birth, we had both converted to Judaism by an Orthodox rabbi. just to make sure that all bases would be covered for them in the future should either choose to follow the path of Orthodox Judaism. Joel Shulson presided at Mark's ceremonial bris, while his father, Rabbi Mara Shulson, presided over each conversion, which took place at the Sons of Israel mikvah in Cherry Hill. The 2 visits to the mikvah were among the most glorious of our lives, truly unforgettable. Oh no, I'm already running out of time. I'll squeeze the rest in. It goes without saying that Paul and I adored raising our children. Through good times and bad, we never ever forgot how deeply blessed we were to have Mark and Lauren, now our son-in-law Andrew, his family, and our beloved grandchildren, Ethan and Mina. For a variety of reasons, we put our children into Solomon Schechter Day School in Bala Cynwyd when they came of school age. By the time Lauren started gone, or kindergarten, I was ready to go back to work full-time. To make a long story short, I applied for and became a 6th grade teacher at Schechter. I taught math and history to 6th graders at Schechter for 12 magnificent years. They were some of the most enjoyable, deeply fulfilling of my life. I fell head over heels in love with middle school-age children. I also loved being in the same school as my children and even teaching math to them when each was in 6th grade. By 1998, Schechter had changed its name to the Raymond and Ruth Perlman Jewish Day School, and I had earned my 3rd master's degree. Now able to become a school administrator in Pennsylvania, I was now ready to spread my wings. In the spring of 1998, I applied to a local blind ad. It turns out the Torah Academy of Greater Philadelphia was looking for a principal of secular studies. I went through the interview and application procedure and was offered the job almost immediately. Taking the job at TA turned out to be one of the most definitive decisions of my life. I absolutely loved having some influence over an entire school. Though I clearly was not head of school, for in an Orthodox school, this could only have been a male. I was the secular head of school and had major influence over everything that occurred in that program. The TA community treated me like a queen. They had deep respect for me as I did for them, and I was extremely happy there. During my 2nd year at TA, 1999-2000, I was asked to apply for a most incredible position by my former boss at Perlman, Jay Lieberman. The board of directors of Perlman was in the process of approving a plan to create a new middle school, and I was invited to apply for the position of principal and to create that school. Oh my God, I was totally out of my mind with excitement. I had my giant interview with the board of directors up in Elkins Park on a very snowy night, right before President's Weekend of 2000. I was nervous, happy, nauseous, scared of driving such a long distance in the snow, etc. I remember the dear Rabbi Aaron Landis, Za'al, the rabbi at Beth Shalom congregation for many years, came out to the parking lot, took my arm in his, and ushered me into the building so that I would not slip. He was a true angel and a real gentleman. May he rest in peace. As is my nature, I was extremely nervous until the conversation and questioning began. Then I calmed down and I was 100% fine. I most definitely recall one of the statements made to me by the then president of the board. He said to me, quote, "Remember, Susan, this will be the biggest and best professional opportunity of your entire career. Whatever you've loved in a middle school, whatever you've hated, this will be your golden opportunity to implement every single thing you believe in. But do not forget, if the school succeeds, it will be on your shoulders, and if it fails, it will be on your shoulders. Do you understand that?" Unquote. Those words were more powerful to me than anything I can recall. Very early on the Monday of President's Weekend 2000, Jay Lieberman called to tell me that the job was mine. I sobbed and sobbed tears of joy, only wishing that my dear parents had been alive to share this incredible news. The rest is history. The Middle School of Perlman Jewish Day School was in operation for 12 splendid, magnificent, glorious years, from September 2001 through June 2013. It was a magical place and became our own personal Camelot. We were eventually graciously granted a naming grant from the Robert Seligman Foundation, after which we became known as the Robert Seligman Middle School of Perlman Jewish Day School. We eventually merged for economic reasons with the middle school of the Jack M. Barrack Hebrew Academy in September of 2013, where I was given the opportunity to recreate the middle school with a new format and venue. Truly, Robert Seligman Middle School became the school of my dreams and one of my most profound, life-changing personal accomplishments. I chose to be a middle school educator, for I recognize that the years of early adolescence are critical and abound with much individual potential and opportunity. This, I believe. The middle school years are all about building character and menschlichkeit and helping to create the future leaders of our Jewish community at large. As part of this endeavor, we focused on the development of honor, integrity, a growth mindset, social consciousness, and golden values. Middle school is also the time to teach students the vital skills which they will need to succeed in high school. Middle schools need to be safe, freestanding, unique environments, disconnected from elementary schools and high schools, where students can comfortably practice how to take meaningful risks and learn about the rewards and consequences of taking such risks. Middle school is the time when young adolescents must learn to advocate for themselves in a relevant, productive way. I pledged early on to personally care deeply for every single one of the students entrusted to my care, to listen to their voices, respect their concerns, learn from them, laugh with them, cry with them, and engage them in meaningful educational, spiritual, and emotional experiences that would prepare them for a promising future. In short, I proudly dedicated myself to becoming the best middle school educator I could be, trying to always serve as an active advocate and role model for all of the incredible children entrusted to my care. On this note, I will conclude my long remarks. Suffice it to say that sometime during the 2015-16 school year, my final year before retirement, dear sweet Mary Ann Gould asked me if I would be interested in doing volunteer work for Ramon upon my retirement, starting in the summer of 2016. I didn't even have to think about it. I instantly replied, I accept, and here I am at the start of my 6th year as a board member and co-chair of education at my beloved Temple Sholom. I also became a Grammy during the summer of 2014 and again in June of 2017. I am truly a deeply fulfilled Jewish woman. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you for everything, Temple Sholom. Lashana Tova from my heart to yours. Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much for sharing your words. I have to say that if your students were speaking about you, it would have been much, much, much longer, including my own daughter. But the many students that you have taught over the years have so many wonderful things to say about you and who you are and how you've inspired them. So glad to hear your story today. And last but never at least, it's my pleasure now to invite friend Melanie Finister to please come forward. We're so grateful that you're sharing your story today. You're stuck. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Lashana Tova. Hi. My name is Melanie Finister, and I have been a member at Temple Sholom since 2002. I married David Ingram in July 5th, 1998, and we have 2 children, Adam Randall and Elise Sarah. My first important encounter with Judaism came in 1972 when my family moved up north from Austin, Texas to 4720 Cherry Valley Drive in Rockville, Maryland. The day after we moved in, Lisa Newman and her family showed up on our doorstep bearing an apple cake and chocolate chip cookies. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no better way to welcome someone to a neighborhood. As far, we became fast friends, Lisa and I. We were the same age. And in fact, we became inseparable. Best friends for years to come. I sat at her family Seder table every Passover, and her family always came to our Creole New Year's celebration. I watched her spend an entire year preparing for her bat mitzvah, and I celebrated the achievement with her at my very first boy-girl dance party. And over the years, different homes, different schools, even college, we stayed in touch. There have been other significant friendships along the way. My friend Lauren Gelfon, my dear, dear friend Lauren Gelfon from college. I met her the first day of freshman year. She lived just next door. Lauren, who insisted, I am not white. I am Jewish. There is a difference. That was a memorable all-night dorm room discussion that traversed all kinds of political and interesting ideas about identity. Shri Ram was my first good friend in Philadelphia. Raised by a fierce Jewish single mom, she grew up poor. She grew up poor, but she got herself into Swarthmore on a full ride. She was a force, and I was braver in her presence. There are so many other incredible, particularly Jewish women, who have touched me and been a part of my life. When I think back on all of these women, they have something special that I have come to identify as being particularly Jewish. They all had a strong sense of justice, an enthusiasm for questioning and debate, a willingness to be seen as an outsider, and a wild, wild love of humanity and people. Then came David Ingram, the good friend who turned out to be the love of my life. We met at People's Light and Theater Company in 1991. We were friends for many years, but we didn't start to date until 1996. I remember one time we were hanging out just as friends, and David did what he always does. He wandered over to my bookshelves and checked out what I'd been reading. We talked about books. We talked about things that we had both read. We made recommendations. And on this special day, he turned to me and said, I really like your bookshelves. It was a moment. An important moment, as it turns out. He picked a book up off the shelf and asked if he could borrow it. Sure, I said. The book, Blacks and Jews, a dialogue on race, religion, and culture in America by Michael Lerner and Cornel West. Yeah. So, flash forward a bit. We were wildly in love, trying to figure out how our lives would fit together, if we could build a life of happiness together. How would we do it? And then we started to talk about children, and we quickly realized that we were both fiercely protective of our minority status. Look, I want my children to be proud of their Blackness and comfortable with Black people. And David said, well, I want my kids to embrace their Jewish heritage and live Jewish values. And then it dawned on us. These two things are not mutually exclusive. Our kids could be Black and Jewish. Wedding plans went forward. And just a quick aside, I'll tell you a little story about my father. David went to my dad and asked him for my hand, if he would approve, before he asked me to marry him. And then he came and he asked me, and when I told David that I would marry him, I agreed. I was thrilled. I called my dad, and Dad said, "Come home." And I said, "Dad, we're getting married, blah, blah, blah." And he pulled me aside and he said, "Listen, you need to raise your kids as best as you can as Jews." I was like, "Dad, really?" I mean, David and I had talked about this, but I hadn't talked to my father. And he said, "Absolutely." He said, "Your children will need to learn to be Jewish. They will need to be taught, and they will need to be surrounded by Jews in order to identify with their Judaism." Now, the fact that my father understood this inherently and so openly and kindly and warmly accepted our marriage has made a huge difference, and it's gone both ways. Both families have been unbelievably embracing in raising our children, and for that I am eternally grateful. So back to the story. So we joined Temple Sholom in 2002, I believe. Harry and Arlena Gottlieb, some of you know them, introduced us to the synagogue, and we finally found a home. We had shopped around quite a bit, but this felt like a great fit. We joined for the children, but what I didn't realize is that I would receive great, great gifts as well. I didn't know that I would find a spiritual home. I didn't know that I would make lifelong friends. I didn't know that I would find a place that would center and ground me in times of trouble. I didn't know that I would find refuge and peace and healing in these walls. I am very, very grateful for this place and for this congregation. You have made room for me and my family, and I hold you all very, very dear in my heart. So my journey with Judaism is ongoing, I would say. And sort of to wrap up, I'll just talk about a few things that really resonate with me about Judaism. First of all, both Blacks and Jews are a diaspora people. Both understand oppression and share a history of slavery. The principles of welcoming the strangers deeply resonates within me. A tradition of fighting for social justice and a faith that is rooted in a love of life. And finally, the food. And on this day of fasting, I am so looking forward to the food. And I know you are too. So, in wrapping up, I would say that my relationship with Judaism, my journey with Judaism, has been powerful, long-lasting, and ongoing. Thank you.
Melanie, thank you. I'm deeply moved by your story and John's story, and Maggie and Susan. It's funny to have friends that you've known for so many years. In a way, I don't know if I was more surprised that I know a lot of your story or surprised that I get to learn pieces of your story. The bookshelf line, David, is one we'll have to talk about after the service. Brilliant, obviously line. But what today is about understanding our own stories and journeys, and I'm so grateful for all of you stepping up and sharing yours. May you go from strength to strength. May we continue to share many, many more stories in health and in peace and happiness. Thank you so much. Thank you, friends. We will begin our next program at 5 o'clock, the Yizkor service. We may need an extra few minutes for some technical details, but thank you again for your willingness to speak today, and thank you, friends, for being here. Thank you.